Shalom. This is Daniel with Bless Israel Network, and today I wanted to talk to you for just a few minutes about Thanksgiving. You know, the holiday where Americans get together and watch football and eat turkey and have pumpkin pie for dessert and just fill their stomachs to the point where they have to loosen their belts afterwards because they've eaten so much. Well, would it surprise you that Thanksgiving actually is much more than that? That the holiday of Thanksgiving goes well beyond when it was first celebrated by the Pilgrims in Massachusetts in 1621. The holiday of Thanksgiving actually is directly tied to the biblical feast of Sukkot. Yes, indeed. Let me show you. If you have a Bible, open it to Leviticus chapter 23, verse 33, and it says, "On the 15th day of the 7th month is the feast of Sukkot for 7 days to Adonai." In Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 13, it says, "You are to keep the festival of Sukkot for 7 days after you have gathered the produce of your threshing floor and winepress." So, what are we talking about here? We're talking about giving thanks to God for what He has blessed us with. We've grown food, we have drink, we have a hut or a place to live in. So there's much to give thanks for. And we also have to remember that it's in the 7th month. 7th month on the biblical calendar actually is in the fall of the year because the biblical calendar begins in spring and the first feast is Passover. So Sukkot takes place in the 7th month, which is the autumn. Thanksgiving takes place in the autumn, the month of November. So we see some similarities there. We also see that it's supposed to be about giving thanks. So right away there are some similarities, but let's look a little bit further and talk about who the Pilgrims were and how they came to celebrate Thanksgiving, what it really meant to them. You may not know this, but the Pilgrims originally lived in England, but they really didn't feel they could worship as they wanted to. They felt sort of oppressed under the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church and what have you. So in 1608, they moved to the Netherlands, Holland. There, they intertwined and lived with a community of very devout Sephardic Jews who followed Torah, which included honoring the biblical feasts. Now, the Pilgrims were in fact very religious people. Scripture meant a lot to them. They were followers of the Lord. It was extremely important. And so they were very enriched by having this exposure to these Sephardic Jewish followers of Torah who honored the festival of Sukkot. So this was something that had a very significant influence on them. And they lived in Holland for about 12 years. Eventually, in 1620, they decided that they wanted to carve out their own path, if you will. So they set sail for what became known as the New World. And 66 days later, they landed in Plymouth Rock. Now, to give you another idea of how devout these people were and how important they felt Israel and the Bible and the Jewish people were to them, they actually renamed Plymouth Rock Little Israel. Indeed, you can look it up. Not only that, but when the state of Massachusetts started talking about what the official language was going to be when it was first formed, they talked about Hebrew being the official language of the state of Massachusetts. Again, because the Pilgrims were such godly people and they felt Scripture meant so much to them, they wanted to use the language of the Lord, which was Hebrew. Now, of course, we know that didn't happen, but this was a discussion point. Let's look at some other interesting things about the Pilgrims. They felt that under the King of England, that they were under their version of Pharaoh, like the oppressed Jews. They felt that the crossing of the Atlantic Ocean was like the Jews' journey across the Red Sea. It was going to be a miracle if they survived. They felt that when they got to what became known as the United States or the New World, this was their promised land, if you will. So they're really very strong indications that the reason that the Pilgrims decided to celebrate Thanksgiving in the way that they did was they wanted to honor God. They wanted to keep with Scripture, and they had been heavily influenced by the Sephardic Jews where they lived for 12 years in Holland. So this is just a little quick tidbit here, but as you sit at your Thanksgiving table and you enjoy the bounty that the Lord has blessed you with the wonderful food and the fellowship from your family and friends and neighbors and so on. And I pray that you do give thanks, but beyond that, just remember for a moment that this is much more than a uniquely and exclusively American holiday, that the founding fathers, if you will, the Pilgrims, thought the world of the Jewish people and honored the biblical feasts. And so just keep that in mind and think about them in your prayers, that the Pilgrims really were wonderful followers of Scripture and wanted to honor God. And it was more than just about exchanging food and so on with the Native Americans. And I don't mean to be critical in any way, shape, or form of that, but you don't find anything about the true history of the Pilgrims and how they were very devout people and the Jewish influence that was that they had on them and how they honored the biblical feasts and so on. You just don't find that in the dynamic when you talk about the Thanksgiving holiday in the United States. So keep that in mind as you're having your Thanksgiving dinner, and may the Lord bless you. If you like these little tidbits, please go to our website, blessisraelnetwork.com, and send us a donation. Until next time, may the Lord bless you, and shalom.